He walked into the flower shop to pick out centerpieces for his engagement dinner. He never expected the woman arranging orchids behind the counter to be the wife his family erased 5 years ago. He definitely never expected the boy sitting cross-legged on the floor, quietly stacking flower buckets into a tower. The bell above the door rang as Do-yun stepped inside, one polished shoe crossing the threshold before the rest of him followed. The scent of lilies and wet stems hit him immediately, thick and sweet, mixing with the low hum of a radio playing something old and gentle from a speaker behind the counter. He paused there, half in, half out of the doorway, while his driver waited by the black sedan outside, watching his employer with quiet confusion. In 11 years of running the logistics division of Beck Industries, Do-yun had never personally chosen so much as a napkin for any event in his life. Not his father's memorial, not the last 3 shareholder galas, and certainly not flowers. That was what assistants existed for. But that morning, his fiancée's mother had made an offhand comment about him, showing some initiative for once, and something, call it boredom, call it a restlessness he couldn't name, had made him wave off his assistant's carefully chosen florist and walk 3 blocks in the wrong direction, toward a shop he had never once set foot in. The shop was small. Small enough that a man who spent his days moving container ships across oceans felt suddenly, absurdly oversized inside it. Buckets of flowers lined the walls in uneven rows, hydrangeas, ranunculus, sprigs of eucalyptus tied with twine. A hand-lettered price list hung crooked above the register. And then, over the sound of the radio, he heard someone humming. He turned toward the sound, and the breath left his body in one long, silent rush. She stood with her back to him, reaching up toward a shelf of ribbon spools, her hair pulled into a low knot at the base of her neck, shorter than he remembered, but achingly, unmistakably her. The afternoon light came in slanted through the front window and caught the side of her face as she turned, and Do-yun's hand tightened around the door handle hard enough that his knuckles went white. Se-yeon. She hadn't noticed him yet. She was still humming, still entirely absorbed in matching ribbon colors to a mason jar of peonies, the small movements of her hands so familiar it made something in his chest physically ache. 5 years. It had been 5 years since she'd signed the divorce papers and vanished. No note, no forwarding address, not one word since. After the papers arrived at his office, stamped and notarized and already finalized as though she'd made the decision without him, he had told himself, over and over, that if she'd truly loved him, she would have fought. That her silence had been its own confession. He had built an entire understanding of the last 5 years on top of that one assumption. Then Se-yeon looked up. Her eyes met his across the narrow shop, and every drop of color drained from her face. The shears in her hand clattered onto the counter. For 3 full seconds, neither of them moved. Neither of them breathed. Do-yun, she whispered. Before he could answer, before he could push a single word past the shock lodged in his throat, a child's laughter rang out from behind a curtained doorway at the back of the shop. Small feet pounded against the wooden floor, and a boy came barreling out, clutching a stack of empty flower buckets he had clearly been building into a tower. Look, I made it as tall as the door. He couldn't have been older than 5. He wore a striped shirt with a cartoon dinosaur on the front, his hair sticking up in the back the way small boys' hair always does no matter how many times it's combed. He turned, beaming, to show his mother his tower, and stopped cold when he noticed the stranger standing in the doorway. He pressed closer to the counter, suddenly shy, peeking around it at Do-yun with wide, curious eyes. It was the eyes that made Do-yun's entire world tilt sideways on its axis. Dark. Almond-shaped. Unmistakably Beck. Unmistakably his own father's eyes, passed down through him, and now staring back at him from a face half the size of his own. Woo-jin, Se-yeon said, and her voice was steady in the practiced way of someone forcing it to be. Go find Auntie Miare in the back for me, okay? I'll come get you in a few minutes. I promise. The boy hesitated, glancing between his mother and the stranger with an expression that was pure, uncomplicated curiosity, a tilt of the head, a flicker of recognition he was too young to understand. Then he obeyed, disappearing back through the curtain, though not before throwing one last look over his shoulder at the man who looked so strangely, so specifically, like an older version of himself. The curtain fell still. The radio kept playing. Outside, a delivery truck idled at the curb, and somewhere down the street a bell rang as another shop door opened and closed. Do-yun stood frozen in the small, flower-scented room, staring at the woman he had loved and lost, understanding, all at once, that everything he thought he knew about the last 5 years of his life had just come apart at the seams. "How long?" he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Were you going to let me not know?" Se-yeon's jaw tightened. She bent to retrieve the shears from where they'd fallen, her movements careful, deliberate, the movements of someone buying herself time to think. "You need to leave," she said. "You need to leave, Do-yun. You have no right to walk in here, and—" "No right?" The words exploded out of him louder than he'd intended, 11 years of boardroom discipline cracking apart in the space of a single sentence. "I have a son you never told me about. And you're telling me I have no right? Lower your voice. This is my place of business, and I won't have you causing a scene in front of my customers." "A scene?" He let out a short, harsh laugh that hurt his own throat. "You disappeared. You left me a signed contract in silence, and now I walk into a flower shop and find out I have a—" He couldn't finish the sentence. The enormity of it sat on his chest like a physical weight. Se-yeon set the shears down on the counter with exaggerated care, and when she finally looked at him again, her eyes were dry, but hard as cut glass. "You want to do this now? Fine. But not here. Not where he can hear us." "Then when? Another 5 years? The shop closes at 7. Her voice was flat, final. "Come to the side entrance at 8. Alone. No driver waiting outside, no assistant, and absolutely no one from your family's office." The mention of his family landed on him like a physical blow, and she must have seen it land, because something in her expression flickered. Not softness, exactly, but something adjacent to it. 8 o'clock, Do-yun. Or don't come at all." She turned away from him, busying her hands with flowers that didn't need rearranging, and Do-yun understood he had been dismissed. He stood there a moment longer, his heart pounding hard enough that he could feel it in his temples, and through the gap in the curtain he caught one last flash of a striped dinosaur shirt as Woo-jin moved somewhere in the back room. His son. He had a son, and the boy didn't even know his own father's name. He turned and walked out of the shop, the bell above the door sounding absurdly cheerful behind him. His driver straightened as he approached the car, concern flickering across an otherwise carefully neutral expression. "Sir, the centerpieces." "Just drive," Do-yun said. His voice left no room for discussion. As the car pulled away from the curb, he looked back through the tinted glass. Se-yeon stood in the shop's doorway, watching him go, her arms wrapped tightly around herself in a way he recognized instantly, the exact way she'd stood the night she left him, 5 years ago, though he hadn't let himself remember that detail until this very moment. The car merged into the city's afternoon traffic, and Do-yun let his head fall back against the leather seat, closing his eyes as fragments of memory collided against the present, refusing to arrange themselves into any order he could make sense of. 5 years old, or close to it, which meant Se-yeon had been pregnant when she left. Pregnant when his aunt, Chairwoman Baek Hye-ran, had summoned her to the executive floor for what was supposed to be a routine conversation. Pregnant when the falsified transaction log surfaced, allegedly proving Se-yeon had leaked shipping contracts to a rival conglomerate. Pregnant when the board, egged on by his aunt's calm and reasonable insistence, had made Se-yeon's permanent removal from Do-yun's life a quiet condition of his continued position as heir apparent. Pregnant when Do-yun had stood in his corner office and looked down at divorce papers already signed, telling himself she must have been guilty after all, that if she'd truly been innocent, she would have fought harder, and that her silence was proof enough of everything his aunt had claimed. His phone buzzed against his leg. The 8th message that hour from Kong Yuri, his fiancée. The engagement dinner was in 10 days, the guest list numbering well past 300, including senior executives from every major shipping conglomerate in the country and 2 sitting members of the National Assembly. The merger between Baek Industries and the Kong family's shipping empire had already been announced to shareholders, timed to close the same quarter as the wedding. Do-yun looked at Yuri's name on the screen and felt precisely nothing. He'd felt nothing when he proposed 8 months ago. Nothing at the engagement photos. Nothing when she'd shown him swatches for the reception hall. His aunt had arranged the entire relationship the way she arranged everything, and he had agreed, the way he always agreed, because it made sense on a spreadsheet, because Se-yeon was gone, and somewhere along the way he had taught himself not to feel much of anything at all. "Sir," his driver said, glancing at him in the mirror. "Where should I take you?" Do-yun opened his eyes. The afternoon stretched ahead of him, full of calls he needed to cancel and lies he would need to maintain for at least a few more hours. But first he needed answers. "The office," he said finally. "And clear my schedule for tonight." His driver hesitated. "Sir, you have the shareholder dinner at 8. Your aunt specifically. Clear it. Tell them I'm unavailable." A pause. "Tell them whatever you need to. My evening is not negotiable." He had 6 hours until 8 o'clock. 6 hours to prepare himself for a conversation that terrified him more than any hostile takeover he had ever weathered, any boardroom coup he had ever survived. 6 hours to face the truth of what he had lost, and what he might, impossibly, still have a chance to find. The afternoon crawled by at an unbearable pace. Do-yun sat in his office on the 40th floor, the city spread beneath him like a circuit board of glass and steel, every lighted deal he had made, every tower a negotiation he had won. He had built an entire life on this view, and sacrificed everything, it turned out, except the one thing that had ever actually mattered. His assistant knocked softly. "Sir, your aunt is online too. This is her 4th call. Tell her I'll call her back." "Sir, she's quite insistent." "I said I'll call her back." His tone was sharp enough that his assistant retreated without another word. Before he could turn back to the window, his office door opened without a knock. His cousin Jae-hoon stepped in, radiating the same careful, unbothered charm he always wore like a second suit. Jae-hoon had spent the better part of a decade positioned by the board as the backup heir, the quiet insurance policy should Do-yun ever become a liability, a phrase Do-yun had once heard his aunt use in a closed-door meeting she hadn't realized he was standing outside of. "I heard you canceled your afternoon," Jae-hoon said, dropping into the chair across from the desk uninvited. "And the shareholder dinner. Everything all right, cousin?" "I need the original security logs from the espionage case, 5 years back," Do-yun said, ignoring the question entirely. "Not the summary the board reviewed. The unedited files." Something flickered across Jae-hoon's face, there, and then gone. So quickly Do-yun might have imagined it, if he hadn't spent 11 years learning to read exactly this kind of flicker across a boardroom table. "That's ancient history, Do-yun. Why dig it up now?" "Then it shouldn't be difficult to find," Do-yun said evenly, and watched his cousin's jaw tighten before Jae-hoon forced a smile and left the office without another word. It was a small thing. A flicker, nothing more. But Do-yun filed it away carefully, the way he filed away every small tell in every negotiation he had ever won. Jae-hoon knew something about those 5-year-old files that he very much did not want examined. His phone buzzed again, his aunt, calling directly this time. He declined it. It rang again immediately, and on the 4th call he finally answered. "Where are you?" his aunt's voice demanded, crisp and controlled as always. "I'm taking the evening for a personal matter." A pause, and when she spoke again her voice had dropped into that dangerous, quiet register he knew all too well. "The shareholder dinner is in 3 hours. Do-yun, and Yuri's mother is calling me in a panic because your assistant won't explain why you've canceled everything." What personal matter could possibly be more important than the merger announcement next week? "I saw Se-yeon today." The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. Do-yun could picture her exactly, seated in her private study, the same room where, 5 years ago, she had told him that Se-yeon was a liability, a scandal waiting to happen, a mistake that needed correcting before it undid everything the Beck family had built. When she spoke again, her voice had turned to ice. "That woman has no place in your life anymore. Whatever she wants from you. She has a son, 5 years old." His own reflection stared back at him from the darkened office window, pale and unfamiliar. "He has my eyes, Aunt. My exact eyes." "Don't be ridiculous." You have no proof that child is yours. This is clearly some kind of scheme for... I'm not implying anything. I'm telling you I have a son I never knew existed. His voice cracked despite every effort to keep it level. Se-yeon was pregnant when she left. When you accused her of leaking those contracts. When you made her sign those papers. I saved your position. I saved this company from a scandal that would have unraveled everything your father spent his life building. You destroyed my marriage. I protected you from a woman who was never suited to this family, who had no understanding of our world, no connections, nothing to offer beyond complications. She would have ruined you, Do-yun. So you ruined her instead. His aunt's breath came sharp and controlled down the line. And if this child exists, if he is, by some chance, biologically yours, it changes nothing. You have an engagement dinner in 10 days to a woman who is actually suited to be your wife. You have obligations. I have a son, Do-yun said, closing his eyes. And I'm going to know him. If you pursue this, you will lose everything. The board will never accept it. The Kong family will withdraw from the merger the moment this becomes public. Your reputation. 5 years ago, I let you convince me that my reputation mattered more than the truth, Do-yun said, his voice suddenly very still. That corporate stability mattered more than the woman I loved. I am not making that mistake twice. You are not thinking clearly. You are being emotional, and... I'm done with this conversation, he said, and ended the call before she could respond. His hands were shaking. In 38 years, he had never once hung up on his aunt mid-sentence. He had never directly defied the woman who had controlled every meaningful decision of his adult life. It had always been absolute, until he had seen his son's eyes looking up at him from behind a curtain in a flower shop. At 8 o'clock, Do-yun had his driver drop him 2 blocks from the shop and walked the rest of the way alone, his coat collar turned up against the evening chill. The neighborhood here was quieter than the commercial district where his office stood. A bookstore, a noodle restaurant with handwritten specials taped to the window, the kind of street where a person could disappear and build an entirely new life far from anyone who might come looking. The shop's main entrance was dark, the closed sign turned outward. He walked around to the side alley, where a single bulb glowed above a steel door. He knocked, and it opened almost immediately, as though Se-yeon had been standing on the other side, waiting. She had changed out of her apron into jeans and a plain sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders now. She looked tired, beautiful, and tired, and guarded in a way that made something in his chest ache all over again. "Come in," she said quietly. The back room served as both storage and, clearly, a play space for Woo-jin. Boxes of supplies stacked against one wall, a small table with coloring books and a bin of toys against the other, children's drawings taped haphazardly to the wall between them. Do-yun's eyes caught on one drawing in particular, a boy and a mother stacking flower buckets, rendered in careful crayon, with one unlabeled figure sketched off to the side, watching from a distance. "He drew that last month," Se-yeon said, following his gaze. "I never told him who it was. He just started drawing a man who wasn't there." Do-yun had to look away before his voice betrayed him. "When did you find out?" Se-yeon moved to a small counter with a coffee maker, giving her hand something to do. 4 days after your aunt called me into her office. 4 days after I'd already signed the papers." She poured 2 cups and handed him one, her fingers not quite touching his. "She showed me the falsified logs. The transaction records that never existed. And then she told me that if I was carrying your child, she would make absolutely certain that child was never acknowledged by this family, no schooling that mattered, no future in this country worth having. She said the only way to protect him was to let you believe there was no child at all. I would have protected you. Both of you. You would have tried." Se-yeon's voice was soft but utterly certain. "But Do-yun, you couldn't even protect me when it was only an accusation. When your aunt showed you that footage, when the board demanded my removal, you believed them over me. You asked me to explain myself exactly once, in your office, with her lawyer sitting in the room, and when I couldn't disprove something that had never happened, you accepted their version of events." She set her cup down carefully. "You chose them over me. What made you think you'd choose differently for a child?" The truth of it gutted him where he stood. He remembered that exact conversation now. the doubt that had crept in when Se-yeon couldn't account for every minute of a timeline built entirely from fabricated evidence. He remembered his aunt's calm, reasonable voice explaining that love could blind a person, that sometimes those closest to us were the ones most capable of betrayal. He had wanted Se-yeon to fight harder, to demand, to refuse to sign, and instead she had gone quiet, and he had let her walk out of his life, without once chasing after her. "I was wrong," he said. "I was a coward who mistook control for strength. I let my aunt manipulate me, I let the board intimidate me, and I let you go because some part of me was too proud to fight for you. I have regretted it every single day since." Se-yeon's breath caught, tears spilling over before she could stop them. "Do you know what that was like? To carry your child alone, terrified, telling him bedtime stories about a father who lived far away, never knowing if he'd ever meet you." "Then let me meet him now," Do-yun said, stepping closer. "Let me try to be the father he deserves. And when your aunt threatens him again, when the board demands you choose between him and the company, when the Kong family pulls their merger and your stock drops and your investors start asking questions, what will you choose then, Do-yun? Will you choose him, or will you choose exactly what you chose 5 years ago?" The question hung between them, heavy and terrible. Through the wall, Do-yun could hear the low hum of a refrigerator unit, the faint sound of traffic outside. The drawings on the wall seemed to watch him, mocking every first he'd missed, first steps, first words, for birthdays he'd never known to celebrate. "I'll choose him," Do-yun said finally. "Whatever it costs. Whatever I have to give up." "You don't know what you'd be giving up." "I know I've already given up 5 years. I know I have an engagement dinner scheduled to a woman I don't love, because it made good business sense. My entire life is built on calculations and compromises, and none of it has ever meant anything without you." He pulled out his phone. "Watch." Without hesitating, he typed a message to Yuri. "I'm sorry. I can't go through with engagement dinner. It's over." He hit send before he could second-guess it, and immediately silenced the flood of calls that began coming in. "You just ended your engagement by text message," Se-yeon said, staring at him. "She never loved me. She loved the merger, the status, the announcement. She'll survive the embarrassment." He met her eyes. "The only person I have ever actually broken something with is you. And I'm asking for the chance to make it right." "This is insane, Do-yun. You're throwing away everything on a maybe." "I'm choosing the possibility of being his father." "If that's insane, then I don't want to be sane." Se-yeon turned away, her shoulders shaking, and Do-yun wanted more than anything to reach for her. But he'd lost that right years ago, so he simply stood there, letting the weight of everything they'd lost fill the small room around them. "He likes dinosaurs," Se-yeon said finally, her voice thick. "Not dragons, dinosaurs, specifically the ones with the long necks. He's terrified of thunderstorms and won't sleep unless I leave the hallway light on. He's learning to write his name and gets frustrated when the letters come out crooked. He's shy around strangers, but once he trusts someone, he doesn't stop talking." Do-yun's throat tightened past speech. "Thank you." "I'm not saying yes to everything," Se-yeon said, turning back to face him. "I'm saying I'll think about it. I'll talk to him, prepare him, and if I decide to let you into his life, it will be slow. It will be supervised. And the first time you choose your company, or your aunt, or anything else over his well-being, I will take him somewhere you will never find us. Do you understand?" "I understand." She pulled a business card from her apron pocket, wrote a number on the back, and pressed it into his palm, her fingers warm against his skin for exactly 1 second before she pulled away. "Go home, Do-yun. Deal with the chaos you've just created. Talk to your aunt, talk to your board, figure out what your life looks like now that you've blown it apart. When you're absolutely certain you can handle what comes next, call me." He closed his hand around the card. "Can I ask you one more thing?" "His name. Woojin. Why did you choose it?" Se-yeon's smile was small and sad. "It means protector of the truth. After everything that happened, I needed him to grow up believing the truth mattered, even when the people around him tried to bury it." Do-yun nodded, unable to speak past the emotion lodged in his throat. At the door, he paused. "I loved you, Se-yeon. I never stopped." "I know," she whispered. "That's what made it so hard to leave. By 6 the next morning, Do-yun's lawyer had confirmed everything the flicker on Jae-hoon's face had suggested. The falsified transaction logs from 5 years ago had been generated using login credentials belonging to Jae-hoon's own assistant, under direct instruction from Chairwoman Baek Hye-ran, who had wanted Se-yeon, a woman with no corporate lineage and no family alliance to offer, permanently removed before Do-yun could name an heir she hadn't personally selected. Do-yun walked into the emergency board meeting an hour before it was scheduled to begin. His aunt was already there, along with 3 senior board members, their expressions ranging from concerned to openly hostile. "We need to discuss your recent actions," his aunt began. "No," Do-yun said calmly, setting a sealed folder on the conference table. "You need to listen. 5 years ago, you accused Se-yeon of leaking shipping contracts to a rival conglomerate. You showed me falsified transaction logs and altered communication records. My lawyer has the originals here, along with internal messages detailing exactly how the evidence was manufactured and by whom." He let the silence stretch a beat before continuing. "Furthermore, Se-yeon was pregnant when she left, with my son. A son whose existence was threatened unless she disappeared quietly. Those threats came directly from this office." "Do-yun." His aunt's voice had dropped low, dangerous. "You're making serious allegations." "I'm stating facts, and those facts are documented and already secured with 3 separate law firms. If anything happens to me, to Se-yeon, or to my son, this becomes public. Every shareholder, every regulator, every outlet in Seoul will know exactly what was done in the name of protecting this family's reputation." One of the board members, Director Song, cleared his throat. "What exactly are you proposing?" "Transparency. I'm acknowledging my son publicly. I'm clearing Se-yeon's name with a formal apology from this company. And I'm making it clear that anyone who threatens my family again will face consequences that extend well beyond a boardroom." "The merger with the Kong family is dead," another director said flatly. "Then it's dead," Do-yun said. "I'm not building my son's life on lies and cover-ups." He turned to his aunt. "You taught me the Baek legacy was everything. You were wrong. Family is everything, and I finally have a chance to build a real one." His aunt rose without another word, her chair scraping hard against the floor, and walked out, heels striking the marble in a rhythm that sounded almost like a countdown. At lunch, Do-yun called the number on the card. Se-yeon answered on the 3rd ring. "It's me," he said. "I told the board everything. I confronted my aunt. I'm going public with Woo Jin's existence." A long pause. He could hear her breathing on the other end, could picture her standing in the shop, deciding whether or not she could trust him. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." "He has swimming lessons tomorrow at 4, Se-yeon said finally. "At the community center on Oak Street. If you want to meet him properly, really meet him, be there at 3:30. We'll talk to him together first." "I'll be there." "Do-yun." A pause. "Don't make me regret this." The next afternoon, he arrived 15 minutes early, having changed his clothes 3 times before finally settling on jeans and a plain sweater, the most casual outfit he'd worn in public in years. He'd left his security detail at the office and driven himself, parking 2 blocks away just as he had the night before. Se-yeon was already waiting by the entrance, Woo Jin beside her in swim trunks patterned with tiny dinosaurs, a towel clutched in his small hands. When the boy spotted Do-yun approaching, he pressed closer to his mother's leg. "Mommy, it's the man from the shop." "I know, sweetheart." Se-yeon crouched down to his eye level. "Remember what we talked about this morning? About your daddy?" Woo Jin nodded slowly, eyes wide. "This is him. He's come to watch you swim today." Do-yun crouched down too, making himself smaller, less overwhelming. "You're my daddy," Woo Jin said, uncertain, testing the word. "Yes, I am," Do-yun said softly. "And I am very, very glad to finally meet you properly. Mommy said you lived far away." "I did. But not anymore. I'd like to be close, if that's all right with you." Woo Jin studied him with the same directness only a 5-year-old could manage. "Why didn't you come before?" Do-yun glanced at Se-yeon, who gave him a small, permitting nod. "Because I made a mistake," he said honestly. A big one. I didn't know you existed, and the moment I found out, I came as fast as I could. Are you gonna leave again? No, Do-yun said. I'm going to be here for every swimming lesson, every birthday, every time you want to show me something you've made. If you'll let me. Woojin looked at his mother one more time. Se-yeon's eyes were bright, but she was smiling. It's up to you, baby. Do you want Daddy to watch you swim? Woojin considered this for a long moment, then held out his small hand. Okay, but you have to sit in the special seats for families. I'll sit wherever you want me to sit, Do-yun said, and took his son's hand, feeling something in his chest crack wide open. They walked in together, Se-yeon on one side, Do-yun on the other, Woojin between them chattering about how he could now swim 5 whole strokes without stopping. Do-yun listened to every word, memorizing the way his son pronounced strokes, the way he swung their joined hands as he walked. When Woojin dove into the pool and came up laughing, Do-yun watched every second of it from the bleachers beside Se-yeon. He's amazing, Do-yun whispered. He is. Se-yeon's voice was soft. This doesn't mean we're back together, Do-yun. It doesn't mean I've forgiven everything. I know. But he deserves to know his father, and I'm not going anywhere. We'll figure the rest out one day at a time. One day at a time, she agreed. When the lesson ended, Woojin came bounding over dripping wet, proudly displaying a gold star his instructor had given him for swimming 7 strokes instead of 5. Do-yun admired it like it was the single greatest achievement he had ever witnessed. Can Daddy come to ice cream after? Woojin asked his mother. Se-yeon looked at Do-yun, a question in her eyes. He nodded. Daddy can come to ice cream, she confirmed, and Woojin cheered, already running ahead toward the door. They sat at a small table in a shop 2 streets over, watching Woojin deliberate seriously between chocolate and strawberry before finally choosing strawberry with rainbow sprinkles. He told Do-yun about his favorite dinosaur book, his best friend from preschool, and the cat he wanted to get someday if his mother would ever agree to it. Do-yun listened to every word, aware that his phone was likely exploding with messages about the merger's collapse, that his aunt was probably already plotting her next move, that tomorrow the news of his acknowledged son would ignite across every outlet in Seoul. None of it mattered, not in this moment. Right now, he was eating ice cream with his son, watching rainbow sprinkles fall onto the table, listening to Se-yeon laugh as Woojin launched into a rambling story about a dinosaur who was secretly afraid of thunderstorms, just like him. Right now, Do-yun understood he was exactly where he was supposed to be. If you made it to the end of Do-yun and Se-yeon's story, drop a comment on what part hit you hardest, and hit subscribe for the next one. See you in the next story.